Welcome to the Rational Egoist. I'm your host, Michael Liebowitz, and there is perhaps no more controversial figure on the present landscape or even in my lifetime than is former President Donald Trump. This is perhaps especially so in the circles in which I engage in my social media feeds amongst objectivists, libertarians, conservatives who question whether he should be supported, tolerated, gone all in for. And recently, an op ed piece was written by Carl Barney, an objectivist, in which he said, I judge that Donald Trump's assets far outweigh his liabilities. Now, that is more than just saying, I pick Trump as the lesser of two evils. Kamala is so horrible that I would pick anybody. That's an endorsement of Donald Trump from Carl Barney. So, anyways, there was a comment from Professor Richard Salsman, also an objectivist, who came out in support of Carl Barney. Not to say that he agreed with every single point that Mr. Barney made, but just that he, by and large, concurred with the sentiment. So I reached out to Professor Salsman, who's been on my show before, and asked him if he would like to debate the issue. He was kind enough to say yes, and within a day's notice, here he is. He's a professor of economics at Duke University and a senior scholar at the Atlas Society. Professor Salsman, welcome back.
Thank you, Michael. Good to be back.
So obviously this is an informal debate. We don't have a moderator, but we have agreed on some terms. So what we're going to do is each give an opening statement, and then we're going to abstract some statements that Mr. Barney made, and we're going to debate and discuss them. So to me, there's almost no more important, other than the right to life, there's nothing more sacred than the right to property. And Trump clearly does not support the right to property, as shown by his support for the Kelo decision, which took place in Connecticut, where I live, in which the government decided to use eminent domain, which I don't think is a good idea, even in its proper application. But they used eminent domain to take private property and give it to a private company. And Trump was in full support of that. Trump has also, on numerous occasions, called for the federal government to compel Apple to release its security secrets so that the government can hack the phones of alleged criminals, actual criminals. That's another clear violation of property. Trump also said that guns should be taken from people and then due process given. To further exacerbate his disregard for the Constitution, he actually banned bump stocks. Then there's this quote from Trump after the 2020 election. He said, a massive fraud of this type and magnitude allows for the termination of all rules, regulations, and articles, even those found in the Constitution. So we've got a clear disregard for property rights, clear disregard for the Constitution. If all he did was the next thing I'm going to say, I wouldn't support him. Trump actually brought 9/11 truther, an all around vile human being, in my assessment, Laura Loomer, to a 9/11 ceremony. That's just such a disrespect to the victims that died that day and their families. Then there's this. Prior to taking office, Trump said, I'm going to pick the best people. You're going to be so tired of winning. You know, everything that he said, he's going to pick the best people. The following people are only the ones I'm going to name. There's far more, but just these have disavowed him, and most of them will no longer support him. His former vice president, his former chief of staff, two former defense secretaries, a former secretary of state, former national security advisor, his former attorney general, his sister, and his niece. These are the people that know him best, know him in the work environment. So just for these things alone, in addition to what we're going to get into, I would never support Trump and I wouldn't vote for him. I won't condemn, however, if somebody wants to vote for Trump, if they say, look, they're both god awful, but I believe we have to vote for somebody, and I just think she's worse. I got no beef with that, no gripe. But as I said, Mr. Barney's statement is that Trump's assets far outweigh his liabilities. That to me is an endorsement, and that's what I disagree with. And with that, I turn it over to Professor Salsman.
Well, thank you, Michael. A couple things, and then we should go back and forth. By the way, isn't this much better without a moderator? I think the presidential debate, that's how Lincoln Douglas did them back in the 1850s. These moderators are just twisting and contaminating the proceedings, but
I agree.
no reason two adults can't get up and start asking each other questions, opening statements and
Yes,
asking other questions.
I agree.
Here's first couple of impressions of how you said it and the way you said it. Barney did put it as assets versus liabilities, and I noticed you didn't name any assets. You named some liabilities that I'll question, but the key here is context. I look at judging candidates, parties, and elections in two ways. One, with an absolute standard, and the other one with a relative standard. All right, so the absolute one would be which of these candidates or which of these parties or which of these platforms, you can go that way too, are closest to rational governance. In other words, what you and I agree with, Michael, a constitutionally limited republic which defends and respects and protects individual rights, especially property rights, but also rights to free speech and assembly and other things. So that's the first thing, that you use this gauge and gauge a candidate that way. Now, I contest that if you only did that, you'd never vote for anybody, especially as America moves and the world moves more and more away from that. So the second standard has to be, who are the vying candidates and how close does each of them come to that standard and how far away are each? I think in this case, weighing assets versus liabilities, assets minus liabilities, as you know, is worth or net worth. The net worth in terms of political character, policy, track record, assets and liabilities. And I didn't coordinate this with Barney at all, so it's not my language. I'm just picking up his. Enormously outweigh Harris. She's insolvent in terms of liabilities exceeding assets. So I don't even think, Michael, I wouldn't even put it as a lesser of two evils, because you have one with huge net worth, a lot of liabilities, but huge net worth, meaning assets far exceeding his liabilities. And then you have someone who's morally bankrupt, politically bankrupt, policy bankrupt. That entire party, in fact, in my view, is bankrupt. So another aspect of the context I think you have to keep into account is I wouldn't over personalize these things. Wouldn't even do it, by the way, with Biden, Harris, or anyone else. They're part of a party system. So I think part of what the analysis has to be is not just that absolute standard, how close are they to capitalism or how far away, and not just the relative difference between the two. But I think you have to also ask, what party do they represent? Who are their allies? Who are they likely to have in their cabinet? What is the party platform? What are the donors of the party? This is very important in America because as individualist as some of these people may be, they do work within a party context. And here you do have to bring in, say, it doesn't have to be ancient history, but the history of each party, the direction it's going in, what its track record has been. On that score, I won't go into great detail here because I know you mostly want to talk about Trump versus Harris. On that score, I've written a lot about this and I've spoken a lot about this. I am four-square Republican unabashedly. And I think the Democratic Party has been an unmitigated disaster almost through its entire history in America. I think philosophically, it's important to remember not appealing to authority here. Ayn Rand said democracy effectively is majoritarian rule. It's kind of like mob rule. She said it's actually a form of collectivism. Namely, it doesn't appeal to any particular standard of individual right. It just basically says whatever the majority wants. And the Democrat Party has been that way for a long time. And this is quite apart from the issue of being racist, slavery, segregationist, KKK, the welfare state, the New Deal, the Great Society, involvement in World War I, World War II, Vietnam. I mean, I could go on and on and on, but almost on every major issue in the last 150 years, the Democratic Party's been on the wrong side, and it's been bad for America. Now, I wish I could say in the last 50 years they changed their stripes. They're no better. They're just as warmongering as ever. They're still trying to expand the welfare state. They're still trying to expand the regulatory state. I don't think the Republicans are very good about stopping them, mostly because they're conservatives. So a conservative only conserves what the other side has been doing for the last 50 years. They don't have a positive agenda. And Trump certainly doesn't. Trump does not get up there and say, I'm going to move us toward capitalism. The only one I know of in my lifetime that's even tried that was Reagan. And he was very successful just to the extent which he did it. Trump is not that, I realize, but Harris and now especially Walz are so socialistic, so statist, and unlike prior Democrats, so anti-civil liberties, so interested in censoring dissent and censoring speech and shutting down social media. But I would put at the top of the list, and I'm not even sure Mr. Barney did this. I always put at the top of the list, especially in today's times, war and peace, issues of war and peace. And I believe the policy we're seeing from the incumbents is getting us involved in wars that aren't to our self-interest. Trump is very good on that. I don't really care about Laura Loomer. I don't think Laura Loomer anybody knows or it's relevant. It's just not relevant to judging. World War III would be relevant. Like, are we more likely to get into World War III with Trump or Harris? And the answer is Harris. She's anti-Israel. She's anti-Semitic. She believes money should be spent on defending Ukraine, even though Zelensky is an autocrat and a buffoon and a clown. And Trump kept us out of wars. Trump does not believe the U.S., it doesn't say so in the Constitution either, that the U.S. should be defending foreign countries. That's not in the Constitution. We're supposed to provide for America's national defense, not for Ukraine's, not for these 32 NATO nations. So he's very good on that. He's very good on tax cuts. He's very bad, Michael, you know, on tariffs. He's just so wrong and stupid on tariffs. He thinks foreign exporters pay tariffs, whereas in fact, Americans pay tariffs. And he never refers to tariffs as taxes. They are certainly taxes. So that whole policy is ridiculous. I'm not sure I support a wall on the border, but I'm a advocate of you know, what I call the Ellis Island model. We should have massive immigration that's safe, that avoids criminals, terrorists, the diseased. Maybe he could try to do that, but the other side is complete open borders, and it's totally reckless and it's totally anti-American interest. So we could go on. There's other things to mention, but this asset liability approach, this is kind of funny because Barney is a very successful entrepreneur. He probably thinks in terms of balance sheets and assets and liabilities. It's not a bad way of assessing it. It's just to make sure you get the account of the assets. What assets are we talking about politically? What assets are we talking about? What liabilities are we talking about politically? So I would throw it back to you and actually ask you whether you think he has assets and what they are, because you name liabilities. I get those. I'm for property rights too, but Harris isn't. So what do you think his assets would be?
So Barney actually listed a bunch of the assets, and that's what we're going to go over. But I'll tell you what, there's two assets I think he has: tax cuts, and by and large, I think his Supreme Court appointments were good. That's it. Now, you might be able to name something that I'm not remembering, and I say, "Oh yeah, that's true. I forgot about that."
What about his border policy? There was almost no border illegal immigrants coming over.
Well, here's the problem with that: is Trump says he's a constitutional originalist. His supporters are constitutional originalists. There's absolutely nowhere in the United States Constitution that authorizes the federal government to regulate immigration. Does not exist. If you can read the text over and over, front to back, it's not there. So whether you think that pragmatically or consequentially immigration is a good idea, the federal government simply does not have the authority to regulate it. For that, I have the authority of James Madison. You can read the report of 1800 where he says as much. I've also interviewed Richard Epstein on the subject. Richard Epstein says, who, by the way, thinks it's constitutional for the federal government to be involved in immigration, but not from an originalist perspective. From an originalist perspective, he said no. I also interviewed from the Cato Institute, Ilya Soman on the subject, also says no. There's no constitutional authority under an originalist interpretation for the federal government to be involved. So if we're going to be pro-constitution, then we have to say that Trump's border policies are unconstitutional.
Well, it does have citizenship in the Constitution, and it's well known. And neither of those guys, to my knowledge, are for complete open borders of the kind we're seeing now.
No, so they're not. No, they're not. But they
yeah, I know. So they support my position. Whether it's originalist or not is like hair splitting. But everyone defines a state as having a territory and a border that it's able to defend and regulate. I think
not James Madison.
What's that?
Not
Madison was for
James
open
Madison.
border, was open for open
James
borders.
Madison, his
If
report
James,
of
yeah, I would,
1800.
if James Madison was for open borders, then he's an idiot.
Well,
I doubt he said that.
well, you can
But
read the report of 1800.
none of the founders believe that.
Hold on. All I can say to you is this, and I
Yeah.
don't have time to grab it all. I can say, read
Yeah.
the report of 1800. You can read the Constitutional Convention debates, read
Yeah.
the Federalist Papers. There's simply no authority for that. You're right. They give them authority for naturalization, but not immigration. And they well understood that there were going to be immigrants who didn't want to be naturalized. The immigration would have been controlled because of the 10th Amendment by the states. States would have the right to exclude immigrants. The federal government would not.
All right, let me ask you this then.
Sure.
When the federal government prevents Texas, Arizona, and other border states from protecting their borders, which has exactly been the Biden-Harris policy, they've gone out of their way to go to court to prevent those states from protecting their borders.
Sure, they're wrong.
By your standard, that's wrong.
Yes.
But that's their policy. I mean, that's the Harris-Biden policy.
I'm not here, as I stated from the outset,
Yeah.
I'm not going to defend Biden, Harris, or anybody else. I wouldn't vote for her. I wouldn't support her. I wouldn't advocate for her.
So if Trump got in again and simply said to those 3 states, we're not going to do anything federally anymore because we've been told by Michael and others that it's against the Constitution, but we're going to fully back Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, and others to do whatever you want with the border.
Well, I don't know if they could do whatever they want. I mean, that's
well, I mean, they want to protect themselves.
They could exclude.
They
could set their own immigration policy. Is
right,
what I'm
but
saying.
they're likely to be more restrictive and more orderly than the current regime, and that's Trump's position, right? And Trump could stand aside and applaud that. But the point is, you have a clear contrast here. You have a border which is totally being overrun, and it's filling the country with people we do not know, millions and millions and millions of them, and they're ruining all sorts of things. And
that's all debatable.
And what's different?
That's all debatable,
different is
Professor.
Trump is for not banning immigration, but having legal immigration.
Yeah.
And the hair splitting over whether the federal government does this or whether the states, if it was left to the states, I do believe we wouldn't have the current situation. And you just have Trump standing behind saying, well done, you're controlling the border.
Except for the states that allowed immigrants in.
But the Harris approach is to say, states, you can't do a damn thing. The federal government will compel you.
Sure. And she's wrong. I have no problem with that.
Yeah.
But I do take issue with the idea that the country's being overrun by immigrants. For one thing, from an individual rights perspective, if I'm a business owner, I should be able to hire whomever I please, whether they happen to come from Mexico, Tijuana.
Agreed. I just want them processed.
Wherever else. So
totally.
to exclude them violates the business owner's rights to hire whom they please. That's first. Secondly, the economics show that immigrants are lower on crime. Even illegal immigrants are lower on violent crime. They tend to pay as much into the system as regular citizens. I mean, there's so much economic data out there, whether it be from Alex and Aberstay or Brian Kaplan. I mean, it's just not true. The sort of narrative that's pushed out there. But I don't really care to debate it on those terms because I'm a strict constitutionalist and I just say Trump's wrong on the issue. So the first point though, so that Barney says, and I want to see if you agree with this. He says President Trump is an entrepreneur, not a politician. That's one of the assets or one of the praises that he offers Trump. So if you agree, if you agree with him, then we can debate that point. If you disagree with him, we can just move on to the next.
Well, that's really interesting, Michael. It is he did say it up front, so it's possibly important to say, well, why would he put that number one? I hadn't really thought about it this way, but I do have definite opinions about this. Being an entrepreneur in politics is good and bad, right? Here's the good part. You actually know how the economy works. You know what it means to create wealth. Your entire career, like Harris and Biden, has not been spent stealing wealth from others or being in politics all the time. So if all he means is this person not only has life experience, but has been successful as an entrepreneur, that it suggests certain character traits and productive prowess, the kind of virtues that objectivism would extol, the producer rather than the looter, rather than the moocher, that is definitely an asset. And the other side is all liabilities and all parasitism. Now, here's the problem. Hoover was a businessman too. Trump is a businessman. One of the problems with businessmen going into politics is one, they're used to running their own enterprises, and they're not good at getting collaborative effort from politicians who don't give a damn about them. They also don't come in with any helpers, so to speak. People who are career politicians, have cabinet officials, have links at the think tanks, have resumes that are sent to them. And part of the problem with Hoover and Trump, this is especially true of Trump. Yes, he won. Yes, he got in, but it took a long time, and in many cases, he just didn't accomplish it to get the cabinet. But you need to hire like 2,500 people to put them at the top of these 16 cabinet agencies, and then have assistant and deputy secretaries. I think he hired maybe 150 of them. So much, and we know this from the resistance he got, even from the Pentagon. Much of Trump's governance was governing against leftovers from the Obama administration. So this is not to excuse his performance. His performance, I think, was still amazing pre-COVID. The whole COVID thing was a disaster. One of his great, great demerits that I would name, not just the tariffs. The worst thing he ever did was embolden the lockdowners and embolden Fauci. We can talk about that. But if that happened, that would be a reason not to vote for Trump, that he allowed all that to happen in 2020. But that entrepreneur thing is very interesting for the reasons I won't repeat it, but it's this idea of at least he has these virtues. And by the way, being in New York all those years, I lived in New York. Everybody should know that being in any major city in a particular field called the construction of buildings, when there's cement companies and labor unions and the mafia and politicians on the take, it is amazing, I think, that Trump achieved what he did and got his name on a whole bunch of buildings. And they're looking for dirt. They're looking for corruption. They're looking for payoffs. And all the politicians know him. We're begging him for money. It is amazing, actually, how clean his record is in his entrepreneurial business career. And including his family, Ivanka and all the other ones. I think people don't even mention this very much, but that alone is quite an accomplishment, that he accomplished all those things. And there really isn't, a dirty business practices thing going on. Whereas Obama, Biden, most of Bill Clinton, they all became multimillionaires without ever being in business. That is the ultimate corruption. Trump goes into office and his net worth actually goes down. He built all his wealth beforehand. Those guys go into office dirt poor and they come out multimillionaires. That alone should tell people that there's something wrong, not just with the system, but with the people who go in saying, I'm clean. I've never, been a money grubbing businessman. I've served, like Kamala Harris says, I've been a DA for all these years. I've served the people. Yeah. And they end up being multimillionaires. And what did they produce? They got their money when they got into office. Anyway. What do you think about the entrepreneur thing? The entrepreneur thing, you don't think that's a big asset?
No, well, my first thing is actually the second part of his statement where he says Trump's not a politician. Trump first took out an op-ed piece contemplating running for president in 1987. He joined the Reform Party later on. He actually set out an exploratory committee to run for president, I think, in 1999. Yeah. He again flirted with the idea in 2012. And then in 2015, of course, he announces his run. He runs, and he's been front center on the political stage since then. So to say he's not a politician.
Well, he's not a career politician.
Well, but that's not what he says. He says he's not a politician.
Well, he means in the sense of this has not been his life.
Well, but a lot of people, it hasn't been their life's work. Biden has been his life's work, sure, but there's other people that have run for president that haven't. The fact is, the guy's a politician. And as far as him being an entrepreneur, well, I mean, look, he inherited wealth. He inherited connections. He also did a lot of dirty business. And by dirty business, I'm not saying he did dirty business. I'm saying that the business of, as you said, in New York it's not based on production and entrepreneurial insight so much as it is with who you can schmooze, who you can pay off, the connections you can make.
That's shocking to me that you're saying that. You don't think Donald Trump built things, including his wealth?
No,
legitimately.
I didn't say he violated the law. What I'm saying is that
he didn't build it. He didn't build it.
What I'm saying is that he, by and large, operated within a system that it has to do with government favors. And he said as much when he was on the debate stage. And not only that, but you're talking about a guy that went bankrupt 4 times. So if he's relying on what in my view, are terrible bankruptcy laws where the government steps in and that allows you to negotiate how you pay off your debtors. The bankers ultimately were so much in debt that they said were or in the hole rather from that they offered to bail him out. But even if you say he's an entrepreneur, that wasn't really my take. My take is he's not. He is a politician, and not only that, but as you know, there's a stark difference between finance and economics. So a knowledge of business doesn't mean somebody understands the economy as such. They're
Well,
different lanes.
Biden and Harris understand neither of it, and they're
No,
anti
they're
both.
horrible. They're
By the
horrible.
way, by the way, you may not be aware, but the Constitution allows for bankruptcy.
I know it
It's
does.
perfectly.
I'm not saying it doesn't. I'm saying
So
it's not.
if you're a constitutionalist, you cannot be against a businessman,
Oh, hold on.
dealing with creditors by using the
Yeah.
law. He didn't renege on
No, no.
creditors.
I didn't. I didn't say he did.
Go
I
to
didn't say he
bankruptcy,
did.
when you go to bankruptcy court, you do go to court. A judge has to rule it.
Sure.
And by the way, when the Manhattan DA went after him for allegedly screwing over bankers with his loans, he paid not a single banker could they get to go up on the witness stand and say Donald Trump
Okay.
defaulted on it. Well, that's pretty powerful. They could have easily gone in. They're not dealing.
I think
with
that was a horrible case. So that has nothing to do with what I'm saying.
It was a horrible case because they went after Trump. And what I'm saying is, going after Trump, they still couldn't get any banker to complain about him. But you just described him as someone.
Well, hold on.
You just described him as someone who screwed over all his bankers.
Well, no, what I said was he couldn't pay, and that they negotiated with him because they needed their money back.
That happens all the time.
In an interview in, I believe, 1990,
he still built as well.
He did an interview with Barbara Walters where he said to her, "Oh, what bankers have said that I'm not a good businessman?" She said several of them, and he didn't contradict her. But and as far as bankruptcy being in the Constitution, you're right. I'm not saying he broke the law. I don't think the Constitution's perfect, but I think if you're going to go by it, though, you actually ought to go by what's in it and not have judges read things into it.
I don't know how this relates to judging whether he should be president again.
Businessman who
build businessmen.
It doesn't have anything to do with it. But I'm not the one who said it was an asset. Carl Barney did.
I'm not here to defend every sentence from Carl Barney.
I know
the answer. I think the answer I gave is pretty clear. If you have a long career as an entrepreneur, and you're denying this, of course, you're denying that he's productive and had a long career.
No, I didn't deny that at all.
And here's the context. And here's the context. Versus a rival who's been in politics all the time and got wealthy by parasitism. Yeah. That is so clear and obvious a choice that to go back and nitpick whether he renegotiated loans with creditors in 1989 is totally in the weeds. It's totally in the weeds because this is what I mean about missing the context of relative analysis. Trump is largely a businessman. That was how he built his wealth. He truly build his wealth. He's been in politics the last sliver of his life. These other people have never cut a paycheck to anyone, and they've become multimillionaires by corruption.
Professor.
Right there alone, the choice between this person versus that person is so clear that the idea of dipping into a bank negotiation from 1989 totally misses the point.
Hold on. I didn't even want to discuss the entrepreneurial aspect. All I wanted to discuss was whether he's a politician, which he is. You then asked me, since 1987. Since 1987.
But when you look, these people are 70, 80 years old. When you look at the scope of someone's life and career and whether they should lead the country or not, it's very different whether someone spent 90% of their time building wealth.
Hold on. He's a politician. That's all I'm saying.
And whether the other group is not Ronald Reagan was a politician. I would not have accused him of getting there by corruption or becoming wealthy as a politician like Harris and Biden have.
I didn't say that.
That's how Obama, Biden, and Harris got wealthy.
Okay.
Being in politics, which means they're totally corrupt.
Professor, my whole point from the get-go is that I do not, because it drags us too far into the weeds of culture and everything else. I do not want to make a comparison between Trump and Harris. I hate
That's
Harris.
What this is. Okay, then you're missing the point.
I can't stand her.
You're missing the point because the point of Barney's essay and the point of me concurring is people would like to know whether there's an argument for voting for one person or another. And you just dropped the context. My point was you need to make an absolute judgment on each and then relatively compare the two.
Okay.
And you just said, I don't care about Harris's profile.
I don't know. Not that I can't stand her. I wouldn't vote for her. My
You
whole
still have to bring her into the analysis, is
No,
what I'm
I
saying.
don't. And this is why, because he
They're
said,
both on the ballot, Michael.
hold on, that's
You
fine.
have a choice
Hold
between
on,
A or
hold
B,
on.
and you're saying I don't care about
That's
B.
fine. Because this here, see, this is where I get aggravated. And I'm going to tell you the
You can't
truth.
just look at A
Because
in
every Trump
isolation out of
supporter does
context.
this. You start off by touting his virtues. The first
And
thing.
I gave
Hold
you his
on.
liability. I
Yeah,
gave
hold
you his
on.
liabilities.
Which you and Carl Barney both said his assets far outweigh his
But
liabilities.
we named his liabilities.
Okay, but we're going to go over the assets further. But that's an absolute statement. To say, well, he's better than Harris, that's a totally different thing that don't
Yeah,
care
but
to
you won't.
argue about
Right, but you won't say it.
because I don't believe it. But it's
You
just,
believe she's better than him.
no, I think they both suck horribly.
Wow. So you think
And
they're both on the same level?
I don't know
Wow.
which one is actually worse. But
Wow.
let's go further into the
Okay.
things that are
Yep.
said to be his assets.
That's surprising.
Okay, here's the statement.
Yeah.
Donald Trump significantly improved the individual freedom of Americans to pursue their goals with less government hindrance. Do you agree
True.
with that statement?
True.
True? Okay.
True. He did great. He two things mainly, and you just endorsed one of them. You said he did cut taxes.
Yes,
That enormously increases the freedom and the wealth of people
sure.
whose taxes are cut. And it wasn't just for one group, it was for the entire group, and he cut corporate tax. Now, the other thing was
Right.
he deregulated. He didn't nearly deregulate as much as I wanted him to do, but he definitely deregulated. He also kept us out of war, and that enormously increases the freedom of our troops who are not being sent to be slaughtered in Ukraine or the Middle East or anywhere else. That's another aspect of freedom. And he definitely didn't censor anybody. The Biden administration has been censoring. Mark Zuckerberg just wrote a letter about this. The Biden administration called me up and told us to censor everyone all over the place. So on economics, which is the tax cuts, on war and peace, on civil liberties,
Mm-hmm.
I would say even on abortion. Do you know that 11 states now have more liberal abortion treatments than Roe v. Wade? So
Okay.
I don't like what happened with Roe v. Wade, and you liked his SCOTUS appointments, but his SCOTUS appointments got rid of Roe v. Wade. So I don't know why you're endorsing that. The funny thing is,
Because
though,
I think they were right.
okay, but the fact that it's funny because the fact that it went back to the states, even though I don't prefer that, states like California, Oregon, Washington, Illinois, and elsewhere now have more liberal abortion laws than Roe v. Wade allowed. So if you analyze it literally by sheer numbers, Trump actually increased women's right to choose.
Which
I,
it's
but
not
you're
what
against, I think you're against that though.
no, I'm pro-choice. I just don't think
Yes.
the Constitution guarantees the right to it. So I
Right,
think
but what I'm saying is, did Dobbs increase women's right to choose? And the
I
answer
know
is
there's some.
yes.
Well, I know some states have gotten more
I
lenient, and
I
some
know
states have
some are,
gotten more tough.
but
And
I know
but
some are strict, some are
yeah,
stricter,
but
and
given
some are.
California is a huge liberal
It is
state, if I
huge,
had
right?
to
So
go
is
in
mine.
absolute numbers, I'd probably say
Right,
yes.
right,
But
right.
first thing I want to address is this
Yeah,
idea that he deregulated the economy.
to some degree, not a lot.
And I'm going to say to none. He slowed the
All right,
growth of new regulations.
right. So here,
At,
what would Harris do?
okay, but you
What
can't
did
say,
Biden
hold
do?
on. The statement is he significantly improved the individual freedom, but more regulations came into place. Yes, he slowed the growth, but he did
Yeah,
not cut regulations. That's
right.
not
So
an
did Rick. Right,
that's
right.
not an expansion of individual freedom. That's not
So
true to say so.
So once again, well, I do think there was net deregulation, but not a lot. So I might have differed with the significantly improved, but again, Michael, you're getting me into
Okay,
you're
competitive.
getting me into
Okay,
you're trying to get
Competitive
me into
Enterprise Institute,
you're trying to
Cato
get me into
Institute, Keith
defending
Weiner.
you're trying to get me into defending particular words in the Barney statement. To
I'm
repeat, I didn't write the statement.
I
We didn't
asked you if you
coordinate.
agreed with it, Professor.
Well, I told you why I do.
Yeah, I
It's
get
not,
so
it may
then
not be significant, but
yeah.
now here's the relative point which you drop. Relative to the other side, we'd be in war, we'd have much higher taxes, we'd
Fine.
have much higher regulation, and we'd have censorship. Those are four
Okay.
huge
Okay.
things.
But you've
But
just
they're
changed
both
the
on the
subject
ballot.
again. The
No, the
question
subject
was
is who to vote for.
no, the question was, did he improve the individual freedoms of Americans to pursue their
You're missing
goals?
the broader
But
context. He
you
wrote
gave
the
as an
essay.
answer, he deregulated.
You're missing the broader context. Why I'm supporting President Trump instead of Harris. That's what the essay's about.
That's no, that's not just what the essay's about.
Yes, but
No.
that's the context.
But okay,
There's
but
the election is a month
statement,
the election is a month away, and many objectivists want Harris.
I don't care what I don't give a damn what objectivists
But
want.
you're not bringing in Harris.
Because the entire
But
point,
she's not on the ballot. It's just Trump on the ballot.
no, the statement to which I primarily disagreed with Mr. Barney is that President Trump's assets far outweigh his liabilities.
They definitely do.
I disagree. That's why, hold on, but that's why I offered to debate you. Before the show, I said we're going to go point by point, and you can tell me which of Barney's statements you agree with and which you disagree with. You just agreed with the statement that he significantly improved the individual freedom of Americans. The example you gave was that he deregulated the economy. That's not true.
You're chomping words, Michael. This is not what we agreed to.
Those are the absolute words.
Let me finish.
Okay.
I know they're the words. The point of this conversation is, here's a major objectivist, and I supported his view. What's the bottom line view? Support Trump, not Harris. Now you're going through the weeds of every single thing he said about Trump, and you're disagreeing with it. I'm giving you examples showing that your interpretation is wrong, but still you're missing the point. The point of this whole essay, written a month before the election, is to suggest who should be voted for. And in every particular case we've talked about, you never bring up the alternative, which is horrible. The alternative to Trump is horrible. So to me, whether he enhanced the freedom of America with deregulation or significantly enhanced it, the point is the other side would significantly degrade our freedoms. Why is that not relevant?
I didn't say it's not relevant to whether Trump's assets outweigh his liabilities.
Then I'm not interested in nitpicking every word of this statement. That's not what we're facing today. We're facing an election in a month.
Okay, so all you're
whether
saying,
Carl Barney should have used the word significantly.
No, okay, I'm asking.
I'm not going to get in the weeds on this.
Okay, we don't have to.
The difference between A and B is so stark.
Okay, so all you're saying is that they're so horrible that you'd vote for Trump.
No. I said it from the beginning very clearly. Assets minus liabilities. They both have assets and liabilities. He has way more assets than she does. She has way more liabilities than he does, and she is a complete bankrupt.
All right,
he's the bankrupt in the sense of her liabilities far out.
I got you, but that's
her
not
assets.
But that's not saying that his assets.
I didn't say that. I said
at the beginning. You said his assets outweigh his liabilities.
I did say that. I just said that twice. Yes.
Okay. But that's what I want to talk about.
We already did. I gave you 5 or 6 reasons why his assets were.
Okay. But one of those you said was that he deregulated the economy, and I disagree.
Well, let's move on. Let's move on because we don't have the data.
But I also just want to say this you will agree with.
They in the last 3.5 years massively upregulated.
Of course,
you know that. You know that. Okay, so that's irrelevant to the choice.
No, it's not irrelevant to the choice. It's irrelevant. It's irrelevant to whether his assets outweigh his liabilities. That's what it's irrelevant to.
They definitely do.
Okay. To the point
of her liabilities outweigh her assets.
To the point of whether or not he significantly enhanced the freedom of the American people.
We're repeating. We're going over.
No, because I didn't give my rebuttal.
You started citing the regulatory data.
No, he supported locking down the country.
I already said I was opposed to that.
You did, and that's why I say he did not significantly enhance.
You understand? I also said that about tariffs. I also said it about.
You did, yes.
So I'm not a blind Trump supporter.
I never accused you of being so. Have I? Did I? I'm not even. I'm not saying, listen, I've come across a lot of Trump supporters that are blatantly dishonest. But I'm not accusing you of any of that.
Yeah. Okay. I understand.
And I didn't say that when I offered to debate either you or Mr. Barney. I disagree with that one statement. Now, now he also says that President Trump wants to work with Elon Musk to reduce spending, regulations, waste, and fraud in the federal government. Okay. He had 4 years to do this already and did not do it.
Agreed.
So why would I think he's going to do it next time? That's my only question.
Agreed, but they're not going to do it either. They're going to
they're not. No, my main point, and if you bring in the comparison, is that these two choices suck. That's my position.
I wouldn't say that, but I know you do.
Okay, now we get
let me just say something quickly on the Musk thing.
Okay.
Because this was done in the early 80s with the Grace Commission under Reagan. This idea that we need a commission to identify and root out waste, the way they put it is waste, fraud, and abuse. It's so easy because everyone's pretty much against waste, fraud, and abuse.
Yeah.
But Michael, you and I know that the federal government spends $7 billion a year. No, wait, excuse me, trillion. I can't keep up with the numbers. They spend 7 trillion a year, not because of waste, fraud, and abuse, but because they're in everyone's business and they have 16 cabinet agencies and it's a welfare warfare state, and whole departments have to be axed, like Malay is doing down in Argentina.
Sure.
So I don't like the whole idea of I'm going to hire Elon to come in and save
I don't
money
either.
on paper clips. That is utter bullshit. It's deflection. I'd rather them saying, no, we're going to privatize Social Security. We're going to get rid of Medicare. We're going to get the only thing they do want to get rid of, by the way, and the other side has no department they're trying to get rid of, is the education department. If I were to name one of the 16 cabinet agencies that I would first axe if I were president, it would be the education department. Now, Michael, I don't think they're going to do it.
No.
But the fact that they're even suggesting that and scaring the shit out of Democrats before the election is really actually kind of courageous. But that department definitely has to be axed because they're propagandizing to the American youth of this country and ruining the country that way. I don't see anything on the other side where they're saying, let's start reducing cabinet agencies. But the Musk thing is a deflect. It's not waste, fraud, and abuse, although we're all against that. The reason there's so much waste, fraud, and abuse is the government is already spending 7 trillion a year, and it probably should be spending no more than 2.
Well, you also a big problem is the entitlement state, which nobody's
Yes,
going to touch, and
right. But
that's huge.
right, and
It's a
and
huge
that's
driver of things.
and it causes waste, fraud, and abuse,
Sure.
right? So they're not going to the root of the problem. So here's a case where you could criticize Trump for even suggesting this goofy little commission that Musk will allegedly work on. I agree with you; it's silly. But again, comparatively, Michael, when I look at the other side, I see no attempt to rein in the size, scope, and power of government at all. These guys might be pretending and going through the motions, but if I were to choose between the two, I would go with the ones who are like pretending to restrain the size, scope, and power of government. The other ones
I
are
actually disagree with that.
unabashedly
I actually
dangerous.
disagree with that
All
approach,
right,
and
all
I'll
right.
tell you why. But I'll remind me because I want to ask you a couple things about the Trump economy, right? Even before the lockdowns, Trump's economy grew at a commensurate rate with Obama's. I think Obama's grew at 2.5, Trump's at 2.7, something along those lines. Then we had the lockdowns, which is part of Trump's thing, and there the economy went into recession and then grew at a very, very low rate. So he didn't have the greatest economy in the history of the world, as he says. But there's also this, right? Trump pressured oil companies to cut production in June or April 2020, right? He threatened the Saudis to withdraw military support from them if they did not cut production. Trump also pressured Jerome Powell to keep interest rates low. A power, by the way, that he now wants for himself to have a part of that. He also signed laws that gave handouts to millions of people while shutting down the economy. So, and the tariffs. So you take tariffs, you take cuts in production of oil, you take low interest rates, you take handouts, you take the deficit spending. Do you not think that he has any blame in the subsequent inflation?
Of course he does. He appointed Powell, and guess who renewed Powell? Biden.
Yeah.
But okay, and who signed the huge multi-trillion-dollar spending bills breaking the tie in the Senate? Kamala Harris. She was president of the Senate. So
Mhm.
the multi-trillion-dollar budget spending for COVID and this and that, which Powell monetized, was totally due not to Trump. It was totally due to Biden and Harris. Now, here's the other thing. The lockdowns, I think Trump made a mistake by elevating literally to the podium people like Fauci and Birx and having daily press conferences about it. In other words, he empowered and emboldened them with their stupid masking and distancing and vax mandates bullshit. On the other hand, the lockdowns were by state, Michael. Some states didn't lock down, some states did.
That's
He
true.
cannot just call up Gavin Newsom
No, he can't.
and that hideous governor from Michigan and
That's
make them
true.
open.
No.
So now the point is, who more supported lockdowns by Newsom and Whitmer and others?
Well,
Biden, Harris.
well,
And what did Trump more support? The Florida approach. So they, even
well,
there,
actually, hold on, hold on. He criticized.
even though I admit he was bad on elevating these horrendous public health officials and emboldening them, the lockdowns were actually something he opposed, and he couldn't do anything
Oh,
about
no, he did not. That's not true. That's not
it. No,
true.
he did.
On March 2016, he
A
sat at the
month later, he
podium.
was again. A month
Well,
later, he said open.
yeah. Well, hold on.
A month later, he
He
said
did
open.
afterwards call for opening, but he
And
also
they didn't open for
criticized,
2 years.
that's on them. But he's
That's
never
on Harris and
retracted.
Biden.
Yes, but he's never retracted his support for the early
Agreed. We
lockdowns.
agree on that. We can move
He
on.
criticized Sweden for
We can
their
move on.
approach,
We
and
agree
he
on that.
criticized DeSantis. Okay.
I'm saying, would you bring this up, Michael, by the way? Because I
What?
think it's related. I think it's related. I have another real problem with Trump. The violence of summer 2020. Now, again, I would attribute that to walls like in Minnesota, the governors letting the violent, Portland. We know it, like Portland, Seattle.
Sure.
Remember all that shit? Washington.
I do.
He was not mayor, he was not governor. But at one point, I was writing, Trump needs to do what George Sr. did when there were riots in South Central LA in '92. He sent in the National Guard.
Yeah.
He said, and Trump did not uphold law and order. Now, I think they would have roasted him for it. I think he was afraid to do it. Can you imagine sending in troops to Seattle or
Yeah.
Portland where they hate him?
Yeah.
But the point, so I'm against him for that. I think law and order has to be a big, and I think it is a Republican issue. The Democrats are the rule of lawlessness.
Yeah.
And Trump allowed the summer of 2020, those cities to burn, including the cities in his backyard, Washington, D.C. That was totally bad.
Yeah. I can't.
But I don't think Biden and Harris were against any of it.
No, but let me just give you my context on this.
Yeah.
So while that was happening, I
Yeah.
wasn't criticizing. You have to understand, I was incarcerated. All I was getting was the media.
I know.
So I wasn't allowed to see that. I
I know.
experienced firsthand COVID
Yeah.
policy
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
the way the prisons were run was a reflection of the way how things were.
Right. I remember that.
Now,
Yeah.
subsequently, I've come to closer to your position. I'm not going to say I mirror it because I haven't thought a lot about it, but I do understand far better now than I did then what the rioters were doing than I understood then. But now I just, we've covered all the major stuff. So I want to just tell you why, in my view, I wouldn't support the approach that you take, why I wouldn't support Trump. Because there's a lot of people out there that believe that Trump is the pro-capitalism candidate. He's the pro-constitutional candidate. He's not. And my thing is, I never tell somebody, I've got a lot of friends, they vote for Trump. I never tell anybody, don't vote for him. That's a personal choice that people make based on their assessment of who's worse. And I have no issue with that. But to vote for Trump and to claim it's because of he's a constitutionalist and that he's pro-capitalist.
Neither of which I've said.
No, you haven't. I'm telling you why I don't support him. It's because I don't want to give off that confusion in the public mind that he is this. Now,
That's a mistake.
Some people tell me I'm wrong, but what I'm saying is it's a
Yeah.
big judgment call, and that it encompasses a far greater debate than the hour or so that we have to debate today, which is why I don't like to really get into that of who to support. Because Kamala Harris is somebody I would never support. I think she's a phony. I think she's an anti-capitalist.
Well, one of the reasons I concurred with Barney, this was for someone with his wealth and his position, and he's still being hounded by the government. It was a very courageous thing for him to do. I normally don't go on sites like that and concur. I do know him, full disclosure, I do know him, but I did not expect him to write such a thing. Then when I heard that he did so, I have not been a full-throated, big Trump supporter, but I have had this standard of saying, relative to what? Relative to what? And those who won't stand up for the relatively superior person is supporting the inferior person. I don't like that. It's gone on a lot in the liberty movement, not only in the objectivist movement, but in the liberty movement. That's not what we're here to talk about, but that infuriates me. The idea that Yaron Brook or Harry Binswang or Onkar Gate and all the other people at ARI are supporting Harris is so horrendous. It's so awful to me. Let me say something, Michael, on the stand. I like the fact that you brought up the capitalist standard from the following position, because this happened to Hoover. Hoover, who was no pro-capitalist, who wrecked the economy, was caricatured as that very effectively by the other side.
And still is.
So they could say, look, capitalism failed.
Yes.
I know they did that. Maybe people try to do that with Trump. What I'm saying is you can't let the other side lie and caricature your candidate. I absolutely agree with you. Trump is not enough of a constitutionalist or a capitalist to be close to us in that regard. But the other side is overtly pro-statist. They are overtly for getting rid of the Constitution. They want to burn the thing to the ground. They want to pack the Supreme Court. They want to get rid of the filibuster. They want to get rid of the Electoral College. They want to eviscerate the U.S. Constitution. Now, Donald Trump isn't all that much a good follower of the Constitution. That's different than being an arsonist.
But
That's
he said it.
different than burning the goddamn document down,
but
Michael, which
Professor,
you know will happen.
He actually said that the rules and provisions in the Constitution could be suspended.
Tell me what constitutional provision he violated when he was in office. You can't name one.
Well, I sure can. He banned bump stocks. Second Amendment.
Okay.
You said I can't name one.
All right. I mean, and the other side is definitely she is for confiscating guns. You know that.
Listen.
Now, is that a big difference to you? You can't have bump stocks, or you can't have a gun at all.
He also
I mean about dropping the context.
But hold on. He also said that he believed in gun confiscation and then give due process afterwards.
He doesn't.
He didn't say that.
No. But back to the caricature thing.
He absolutely said that, though.
He didn't say. He is for the second. Everyone knows he's for the Second Amendment.
I don't know any such thing. He absolutely said.
Okay, you need to research that more.
He absolutely.
He is not an enemy of the Second Amendment.
He said take guns and then give due process afterwards.
No, he did not.
Okay, I'm going to send you the link to that right when we get off the air here. I'm going to send that to you.
But the idea. It is true. It is true. Let me say it is true that if someone is a mixed system person. In other words, they're not fully capitalist and they're not fully statist. And both parties are this way now, and both candidates are this way. However, the Republican Party is much more the capitalist mix and much less the statist mix. I don't know. I don't want to roughly put it at something like 2/3, 1/3. And the other side is 10% capitalist and 90% statist all the way. That's a huge thing to me. But I sympathize with your view that if you put up a candidate, a party, and a platform that's mixed and call it pure constitutional capitalism, that's a mistake. I don't do that. You don't do that. I don't think anybody should do that. Anybody who does do that is just an idiot. No one would believe them. Because if he was a full capitalist, he'd get rid of all 16 cabinet agencies and get rid of the income tax. Everybody knows what capitalism is. They know Trump is not a capitalist. They know, however, he's more pro-capitalist than the other side is. I don't think he actually conveys that enough and well enough. But I agree with you. We should be careful about caricatures that make it harder for us to advance our values, if that's what you're worried about. I worry about that too. So but all we have to do is say, Trump, here's how to be more, and Republican Party, here's how to be more pro-capitalist. We know what that means. Here's how to be more constitutionalist. We know what that means. But the other side, Michael, is so anti those things that it's clear as a bell, at least to me.
Let me just tell you, I supported George W. Bush. I supported John McCain. In 2012, I preferred Ron Paul, but once Romney got in, I supported him. In 2016, I actually supported Rand Paul. And then once he was evidently not, it was obvious he wasn't going to make it, yeah. I supported Ted Cruz. Yeah. I would have supported any other Republican on that stage.
I supported Ted Cruz in 2016.
Yes, Donald Trump is the only one I will not support.
But once, so I supported Cruz. Then Cruz was out in 2016. I was reluctant to endorse Trump until I realized it was Hillary. But even if it had been Sanders, I mean, Sanders is even more. I would have been for Trump. And in retrospect, Michael, it's easier to do in hindsight. In retrospect, don't you think it was better that we got Trump in 2016 than Hillary? Hillary would have had us in all these wars. She's such a war, like McCain.
That's true. But Trump also did bomb Syria. He also bombed the Iranians.
He's been the peace candidate, and the other side is the war candidate.
He also will fund Israel till the cows come home. So I mean,
I think they should just leave Israel alone, like J.D. Vance said the other day.
I do too, but that's not what he's going to do.
Did you see JD?
I did.
Vance was that. And what should we do for Israel? And he said, it's a grown-up country. They can defend themselves. I love that position.
Yeah, I'm not for foreign aid, and there's.
But the other side is sympathetic toward. The other side is sympathetic toward Iran, Hamas, Hezbollah, the campus radicals who are pro-Palestine. That is all a Harris Democrat Party position. you can complain that Trump is a little bit too pro-Israel, but the other side is pro-Israel's enemies.
Well, I'm
Again, big
pro-Israel.
difference.
I'm
Big
just not
difference.
pro stealing people's money to
Yeah.
give to Israel.
And do you support us in Ukraine?
No.
Yeah, I don't need. Do you support us in NATO?
No.
Oh, so we agree on that.
No,
But that's
I don't.
Trump.
No, it's
If
not.
Trump,
Trump's not getting out of NATO. He's not going to
my
get out of
point is,
NATO.
if he had his others, if he had his way, he would get out of NATO. He'd get out of the UN, and he'd get out of all these
I don't know
environmental
that he
boards.
would,
You know
and that's
that.
another problem I have is that you don't know what he's going to do because he has no principles.
Well, he's
which is
not.
why
He hates.
he's now calling for caps on interest rates on credit
That's
cards.
terrible. That's a
Yeah,
terrible
he
idea.
supports paid
That's terrible.
leave, paid
That's
family
terrible.
leave with the
That's
government
terrible.
expense.
Yes,
You just
agreed.
don't know
Agreed.
what he's going to do and when he's going to do it. This college
Oh,
thing that if you go to college, you can get citizenship or whatever. I don't remember the exact thing.
and the
he
other
did.
side is canceling all student loans.
Yeah, it's
The other side
it's
is canceling all
no,
student
it's
loans.
I listen, it's all awful. I hate the position. All
So
right,
you could, another approach would be to say who's predictable or not. I would put it this way. The other side is predictably statist. They tell you what they're going to do. They know what they want to do. She's not even flip.
Trump's statist. Trump's predictably statist. Let's not.
No, he's a mix. No, he's a mix.
But he's predictably, he always sides with big government. He thinks the government, especially with him at the helm, he thinks with him at the helm, the government can be this great tool of good, which I again would disagree with. Okay, Professor Salsman, tell me something. Where can first of all, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Michael. I love very
spirited,
Yes.
spirited debate, and that's
Yes.
fine. I think that we need to have these debates.
Agreed.
I'm okay with it. I think it's wonderful, especially
Agreed.
on such short notice. I just emailed you yesterday.
I know.
So where
That's
can
okay.
where can people find you?
I follow your show. So when you wrote, I
Thank
said,
you.
yes. Well, if they could just go to my website, richardsalsman.com, SALSMAN, but they can also find me at the Atlas Society. So if you just put in Atlas Society Salsman, it'll get there.
All right, perfect. Thank you so
Michael,
much again.
Thank you. And
For now,
continued success with a great show.
Thank you. And for now, this is the Rational Egoist signing out. Till next time.